Hello everyone, we are back with another episode of the Triad podcast. I'm your host, Emo Tempest, and of course we have the rest of the Triad here. You already know Andy.
I'm here. What's going on, guys?
And you might remember Alberto.
What's up, YouTube?
All right. And today we actually have a special guest for you guys. This weekend's Toronto Crystal Cup winner, Jordan Denk.
Hey guys, what's going on? Thanks so much for having me on the pod. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for joining. But before we get started, of course, let's give a shout out to our sponsors and supporters. TCG Titans, always getting us what we need. And of course, FF Decks. That's where we always put our ideas down. So make sure to check them both out. And I also want to give a shout out to our friends Matthew Rice and Brian Berkeley for topping at the Crystal Cup as well. I'm glad you guys all did well. And I think Brian got his invite as well.
Yeah, so not the fourth placer.
Yeah, same as me. Have more in common. Same as me, right? But all right, so let's get this thing started. So Jordan, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? What is your card game background? What did you play before Final Fantasy?
I actually have a decent history playing cards. When I was younger, I played Yu-Gi-Oh! Fairly competitively.
Same here.
And so I would go to nationals and regionals and stuff like that, and I was fairly competitive. But then when I went to school, I kind of got away from trading card games, and I actually started playing poker, which I do professionally now.
Wow.
So
okay.
I've been playing poker for a living for about 7 years now, I guess. So that kind of forayed into Final Fantasy. It's funny, about a year ago, one of my good buddies who I knew from Yu-Gi-Oh! He messaged me, "Hey, do you know there's a Final Fantasy game?" And I was like, "No, are you serious?" Because we both played the games as kids, obviously, and they're obviously our two of our favorite games, sort of thing, 8 and 9. And so we picked up a starter deck each, and I grabbed it was Opus 3, and I grabbed the 9 starter with Sedaine and all that. And from then on, we were basically hooked, and I've been playing ever since.
That's cool. Yeah, we also came from Yu-Gi-Oh! And we've done a little bit of everything, really, like Naruto and Pokemon and stuff like that, too. So that's cool.
Yeah, there's a lot of things to be drawn from all types of games, you know what I mean? So there's similarities through all of them. And yeah, especially with poker, too. I think that's helped me a little bit kind of get into Final Fantasy quicker and learn how to play. Just being around cards in general, I think, gives you that kind of helps you out, I guess.
No, yeah, I understand. All right, so why don't you tell us about the event? Tell us your experience. Tell us, how did it go?
Well, I thought the event was unreal. I mean, obviously going into it, I've never been to a Crystal Cup before. It's the first one that's been hosted in Canada. So we went not really knowing what to expect. There's a group of about 5 of us that came from Ottawa. And I can't say enough positive things about the event itself and the staff that ran it. I mean, the judges were awesome. The people were awesome. It's kind of like beating a dead horse because I've told everyone this, I feel like. But the actual playing of cards itself was by far the least enjoyable part of that weekend. And I mean, I really like playing the game. You know what I mean? I really do enjoy playing the game, but that's just a testament to how great of a community I think exists in the Final Fantasy community. It's just great. Tons of really awesome people. Got to meet people from all over the States and even all over Canada that traveled for the event. And yeah, it was amazing. I'm really upset that it's over, truth be told, and I'm really looking forward to the next one.
So Jordan, how? Sorry. So talking more about your experience and meeting some of the community. Did you fangirl over meeting Matthew Okimoto in person?
Right. Well, actually, I didn't even get to speak to him until the very end of the event. So you probably don't get to see it on stream or anything like that. And if you weren't there, you wouldn't have been able to witness it. But we were really crunched for time. We were going match after match after match, and every one of my matches went close to time. Went all 3 games sort of thing. So I had no time to even really meet and talk to people on day 2. We get to the very end, take the pictures, all that jazz. And then finally I see the guy and I'm like, "Oh man, this is Matt Okamoto, no way," right? And he's like, "Congratulations." And I'm like, he's like, "You pulled a me," sort of thing, right? Because he kind of had the same way, I guess. I think he squeaked in at 16th or something like that, and then won out to win it. So it was pretty cool seeing him and getting to speak to him for a little bit. Unfortunately, we didn't end up getting to stay and getting to really talk to anyone after the event because we were getting rushed out, sort of thing. The actual, because it was held at Anime North, right, which is this really big convention. And so I guess the convention was closing because it was a Sunday, and they were really just trying to get us all out at that point. So yeah, the short answer is yes, I did, and it was pretty awesome getting to meet him. But unfortunately, I didn't get to like talk to him as much as I would have liked to.
That's a shame, man. But yeah, I mean, it's a great community. He's definitely a big part of it. But that's one of the things that I didn't like about it was just the fact that it was being held at an anime convention, so they have their own rules and timelines that they have to follow. So it definitely puts this time crunch on the availability and what you're able to do. But I don't know. It sounds like you definitely were able to just do the meet and greet and check out some of the NA players and just enjoy yourself overall.
Well, yeah, like so day one was far less stressful in that regard, right? Because it's a Saturday, so they're open till I feel like midnight or 10 or something like that, and the event was done at maybe 5:30 or 6. We had all the Swiss rounds done, and the top 16 had been announced, and so we went like maybe a group of us of about 16. I don't know. There's a picture of it on Facebook on the North American page. But we just went down to the bar next door, and we all kind of were in the same opinion. Like, geez, we need a beer. You know what I mean? This was like a rough day, and it was like the event itself, right? Is this huge anime convention. So not only is it 30 degrees and humid in the place, but then you have people that are cosplaying too. So they're wearing like tons of stuff. So I mean, it was really like, we need to get out of here, otherwise I've dropped like 5 pounds of water weight here, you know what I mean? So we skedaddled next door there to grab a few beers and got to know everyone better. And that was probably, for me anyways, the highlight of the entire weekend was just stuff like that.
Oh yeah, that's definitely like that's a moment where memories are built and you kind of share those, and that's really what I like about the community. It's like, it's after the card playing, what you do afterwards, how you bond together, how you just like eventually just talk crap.
Oh yeah, for sure. You know what I mean? Like we were like lightly talking crap a little bit. We're Canadians, so we're super, super nice. So our talking crap is probably different, right? But yeah, no, it was really, really cool. I'm just sad for them because they were talking. It's funny, they were talking about trying to get authentic Canadian poutine, and what maybe people don't realize, it's more of a Quebec type of thing. And so where I'm from in Ottawa, we're actually right beside Quebec. We have really good authentic poutine here, but as you get close to the GTA, you don't get the good stuff. So I felt bad for them that one of the things they wanted to do on that like bucket list of the trip to Toronto, they weren't really able to do. So hopefully, at a later time, there's another event and they can cross that one off.
Oh, I'm definitely going to join them on that. I definitely want to join in that. That's definitely on my bucket list.
So I think Albert had a follow-up question as well.
No, you kind of covered it. I just wanted to kind of get your sort of compare on the. You said you've been to other events in the past for other card games, but also like the attendance. Was it? I'm not sure how many that was, and is that like the largest event you've ever been to or not?
No, so the attendance was. I actually don't know the amount. I want to say it was like 71 or something like that. Maybe it was in the 60s. I'm not sure. So it was about what we kind of expected. I was figuring it was going to get in the 60s, 60, maybe 80 or something like that. The problem that I have, the only, negative thing about the way they did it was that they did host it at the event. So not only did you have to pay the entry fee, but you had to get a weekend pass to go to Anime North. So when you factor in that along with hotel, like gas money, stuff like that, the expenses really start to add up. And I feel like that type of thing might have resulted in a lower attendance than they would have had otherwise, had they, found a way to waive the Anime North pass or found just another venue. That being said, I mean, I can't really complain about the event because I think having it at Anime North actually added to the experience. I know there was a couple players. I mean, Christian Winterhalter, I think his name is. He dressed up as Prince Noctis. We just called him Prince the whole weekend because he was playing in the tournament and came in the top 8, I believe. And he had probably one of the best cosplays in the entire event. Like looked like he had the friggin' blue eyes and everything. It was perfect,
That's awesome.
So part of the appeal was the actual convention itself, right? So as much as I'd say that it might have been a mistake, maybe it isn't as great of an event otherwise too.
Yeah, but you weren't even able to enjoy Anime North either, were you? Like,
Not really. That's the thing. So we showed up on the Friday and we went and found the Harry Tarantula was the name of the card store that was running it. So shout outs to them. Big props for running a great event and thanks for doing that. So we went over to their booth and kind of checked in, did whatever, and started playing some games. And we met some other people on the Friday night. But other than the Friday night, we really didn't get a chance to check it out because we were too busy either playing or by the end of playing, wanted to get out of there so bad because it was so hot and sweaty. I mean, it was like I said, like 30 degrees probably and humid, so not exactly conducive to being stuck in a room with like thousands of people.
all right. Okay, so I guess let's move on from here. So what made you take Mono Water?
Well, I kind of touched on it a little bit earlier. The first deck that I ever played was the FF9 starter from Opus 3, and I've never experienced, but I guess like in Opus 1 and 2, mono water was really not a thing. People didn't really run water. I guess it was one of the weaker elements, but Opus 3 was kind of its coming out party, so to speak, right? They got Cagnazzo, Famfrit, Lena, Knight, Garnet, Steiner. They got just so many cards, and it was really one of the most popular decks when I was just getting into it. So I checked a couple deck lists online, and ever since I've kind of been, a mono water loyalist, so to speak. I've always really liked mono water and the way it operates. I feel like in general it stabilizes really well. It can play both proactive and reactive, which a lot of decks can't. And Garnet's my favorite card, so I've always had a soft spot for the deck in general, and I've always felt like through Opus 3 and 4, I felt like it was definitely one of, if not the best deck. And this was the only set where new cards came out, and I was doubting that for a bit, because 2 months ago I would have said it was a 50-50 shot I was taking ice or mono water to the event, because the ice deck that we were building was doing really, really well, and I ended up going with water just because I thought that there was going to be a lot of ice and there was going to be a lot of lightning, but also a lot of earth to, kind of counter ice. So I felt like if the meta was going to be predominantly ice and counters to ice, well, if I can build a water deck that does well against ice, I mean, I'm going to be laughing because water does have good matchups across the board for the most part. There's not a ton of matchups where you just can't win. Whereas other decks, I feel like they're a little bit more fragile depending on what matchup they play. So I kind of just tested the Knights build, and I tested the other Fusoya version as well. And I just felt that Fusoya with Knights was stronger overall than the Ephemeral and Lena version. Mm-hmm. And so I just kind of went with that. The Fusoya was a very last minute decision though. I mean, I actually flipped a coin the night before day one on whether or not I was going to run Summoner or Fusoya, and it actually came up heads for Summoner, and I just said screw it, I'm going to run Fusoya because I just felt like it was the best.
Yeah, for Boston, Jonathan and I, we did very last minute changes to our decks, and that's exactly what ends up happening. You just you have this overwhelming feeling like this is what I should play. At the very end, this is all right, this is what I'm gonna play.
No, that's totally, man. That's exactly what happened with me. It was like you're ever in a restaurant and you're not sure what you want to get, flip a coin, okay? Say it's a burger or a hot dog, whatever, who cares? Flip it and it comes up burger, and then in the pit of your stomach you're like, oh man, you know what, I really could go for a hot dog though. You wanted the hot dog, you know what I mean? Then you go for the hot dog. That's exactly how it was for me. It's like it came up, it's like Summoner, I'm like, nah, I'm not running that crap. I'm going with Soya. So luckily I did, and luckily it's funny because day one, I swear I saw it one time early game in the 6 rounds. And obviously the math behind it, you should see Fusoya if you're running 3 copies of it far more often, especially with 3 Artemision. Yeah. You should see it far more often than that, right? So obviously I was a little bit unlucky, but like clockwork, day 2 rolls along and I am seeing it early game most of my games. And obviously if you see it early most of your games in conjunction with Beatrix, Cloud, stuff like that, I mean, you're sacrificing damage, but you're really just controlling the board.
Absolutely, yeah. The Fusoya early game it's so overwhelmingly powerful, especially when you start controlling the board. And believe it or not, I mean, water forwards are very sticky. Like, they're hard to deal with because of so much support with you get Bismarck, Leviathans, but just in general, like the way that Ash, Cagnazzo, they all just stay on the board. You can't don't have like a single card answer for them. So you just start building and building and building. Eventually, that Fusoya just helps out.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And even Garnet too. Shout out to Garnet. Like I said, my favorite card. But I feel like, she's people have kind of forgotten about her. And the thing is too is, if you were to ask me what was the best card of Opus 5, besides maybe Wall, I would say it was the Mateus 1 cost. I mean, it's an insanely efficient summon. 1 CP to break a forward that blocks, and the way Ice functions, people are going to be blocking you because they don't want to be taking damage and discarding a card, right? I mean, it's just an insanely strong card. And having a direct answer to that card is super, super relevant, and most decks don't really have that, And I can't say how many times people walked in all tournament into like a fairy for a Garnet. Like I played probably like 4 ice matches maybe, and it definitely happened several times that people just walked into a fairy Garnet play, and lost a forward. And the thing about ice too is that although it's very strong, and if it goes off, it just goes off, and there's kind of nothing you can do sometimes. At the same time, it is a very fragile deck where if it loses tempo or it loses a trade, it can often be enough to just really shift the momentum in your favor and can really cost them a game. So I kind of rode those central cards for most of the tournament.
Yeah, absolutely. That's all it takes. It's just a key card to kind of just ride the momentum. And like you said, Garnet is one powerhouse of a card because of its on-curve cost with its power, and then its insane amount of effects that can go overlooked very easily. I mean, that whole Fairy Garnet combo that you were pulling off was beautiful. Was just like, it's just amazing to watch.
Thanks, I appreciate that. It definitely worked out well for me. I definitely got very lucky over the course of day 2 for sure, though.
So, what would you say was your toughest matchup throughout the day? I guess, like, I know you expected a lot of ice, but was there like, I guess also what was your score out of the Swiss rounds?
So I ended up going 4-2. It was actually pretty sick. So I came in 16th, right? And the way they announced it, they did it in descending order from number 1 all the way down to 16. Yeah. And we had, so that's like obviously already like the best way to do it. They should have had that videotaped and thrown it up on the Square Enix site, because that would have been friggin' great pay-per-view watching. But so we went with 5 people from Ottawa, and the worst record of any of us was 4-2. So we thought that all 5 of us were going to day 2, actually, which was a pretty good showing. Shout out to all the Ottawa guys. And long story short, they get to number 5 or whatever, and they say Jonathan, who's one of my teammates. They get to 10, they say Jason, another one of my teammates. They get to like 12, they say Tony, but now they're getting to 15. And now it's like, oh, geez, like I was expecting to come in at 13 here. You know what I mean? I wasn't expecting this to be this tight. And so now I'm really sweating. It's already 30 degrees in here, but I might have just bubbled the tournament. So now I'm really sweating, right? And anyways, sure enough, 16th, they said my name, and then we got out of there real quick. But yeah, so long story short, I got 4-2, and I just squeaked in. And I'd say the toughest matchup on day 1, that's a good question. It would probably have been my second round opponent that actually went to time. He also made the top 16. His name's Jacob. And shout outs to him. He was like super cool guy. We got deck checked. So right off the bat, we started talking. And he immediately says, hey, by the way, I saw one of the cards in your deck as they were taking your deck away. So I know what you're playing. And I was like, oh, okay. He's like, so I'll be up front. I'm also playing water, right? Really cool right off the bat. You know what I mean? Like we're in round 2 of the tournament, and this guy can totally just be quiet about this. But instead, he's just like super upfront and friendly. And we start talking about water, and we both agree, hey, this is probably going to be a pretty long match because the way water plays, in the mirror, it typically goes pretty far. And that, along with the fact that we're getting a deck check here now, I mean, there's a very high probability that we're going to go to time. So he actually suggested that if we go to time, if there's someone that's clearly winning the game, let's say, the other one will concede, sort of thing. And we kind of agreed to that. And sure enough, we go to time. It's on my final turn of time. He's got the last turn of the game, but he's at 6 damage. I'm at 2 damage or something like that. And his final turn, my final turn, I should say, he's forced to chump block his whole field to prevent going from 7. So anyways, he draws his cards and concedes, right? And which is like amazing because he didn't have to do this, even though we agreed to it. Wow, he didn't have to. He could have just said, F you, buddy, I don't know you, whatever, right? But true to his word, he does that, and then he ends up winning out and finishing higher in the standings than I did, which is, if there's karma, that's got to be karma right there,
Yeah. Okay. So that brings me to my next question, which I think is important. You took Mono Water, and you also played Mono Water in the finals, right?
Yeah.
So what do you think is important for the mirror match? Like, what is your plan for the mirror match?
For the mirror match, it's interesting because it was not really a mirror match, just because although it's like both Mono Water, it's the core strategies are quite a bit different. But I was really prepared. I mean, like I said, I keep talking about the Ottawa crew, but I really can't say enough about the guys that I get to play with every week. I mean, there's some really, really good players, and the way we approached preparation was just we pooled our cards, built all of the relevant decks that were topping events, and play tested against them. So not only playing against them, but playing with them as well, because I find that playing with a deck that you're not familiar with can oftentimes be better than playing against it. And so we did like that. So one of the decks we built, obviously, was Mono Water Monsters. I mean, it's been extremely popular, and it's obviously a very, very strong deck.
Very strong.
And that also factored in part of the reason why I wanted Fusoya in there. Fusoya kind of helps in the sense that it stops their board from getting too out of hand. It can stop stuff like Myra from getting really out of control. And as long as you're keeping their board relatively in check, it's going to be hard for them to pull off Cagnazzo plays. Not only that, I mean, even if they do drop Cagnazzo to Scholar it, you can always just, on stack Fusoya after they try to Scholar their Cagnazzo, right? So, like, it really gives you an out to a lot of what they try to do. So I actually felt like I was way more worried about playing Ice than I was the monster matchup, quite frankly, because I feel like as long as you don't give them enough time to set up, the monsters are going to struggle, because Fusoya is going to put in a lot of work, and you have a decent amount of answers to kind of the tricks that they try to do. Yeah, so, and also it helped that, like, I mean, the guy that I played in the finals, Andy, super nice guy. We found out we were both from Canada, so, like, the whole aspect of, we want a Canadian to win or whatever, I mean, that had already been put out the window, so we weren't worried about anything silly like that. And honestly, at that point, we were just so tired and so ready for the tournament to be over, I feel like, that we neither of us really cared what happened, I feel like. We both had our invites, we both are getting some great swag from the prizes, so I feel like that's kind of why it was far less stressful than, let's say, my top 8 match, where it was like, oh geez, there's a lot on the line here, actually,
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. Going back to your what you were saying about your Swiss rounds, you were expecting a lot of ice, and you played the sort of Mono Water in the second round and then again in the finals. But, like, how much ice did you actually see? And then did all that prep that you do at your locals and with your buddies, did that really come into play?
Well, it did and it didn't. I played a couple really interesting decks in the Swiss. My first round opponent actually was playing Mono Ice, although it was a little bit of a different build. And I'm actually not positive if the strategy was mostly to deck your opponent out, but that's what it kind of seemed like. It was basically running Jespers, and every turn just emptying your opponent's hand, and then time maging and arcanisting and preventing attacks. And that was the only ice I played all day one, which is really unfortunate, because I did prepare a lot versus the matchup, you know what I mean? And I was kind of ready to go. Luckily, I ended up playing 2 ice ice players in the top 16 and the top 4, which I was prepared for. But no, that's the thing about preparing for a tournament. As much preparation as we put in, I wasn't prepared for 7th Scion or whatever it's called, like the Scion of the 7th Dawn, I think they're called. Right. Yeah, I was not prepared for that. So I played that in round 5. And he goes opening turn, plays the backup that hastes all 7th Dawn.
Yeah.
And then next turn plays a searcher, like a forward that searches, and then drops the forward he searched, getting 2 damage in while I'm sitting with 1 backup. And that's the one thing that's really hard for Water is really fast decks can just once you have 5 damage, you're toast, you know? Luckily, I was able to stabilize and ended up getting a few battle trades really well. With again, a fairy into Garnet was really huge later on. And ended up like narrowly winning that one. But that was actually one of the toughest matchups too, because it just was something I wasn't prepared prepared for. And like I had to read his cards every time because I literally wasn't even sure what half of them did.
That's what we call the curse of the rogue deck, where a couple will do actually really well, and the basis behind it is that no one's really prepared for it.
Yeah.
So in the heat of a big tournament, you kind of now have to think on your feet and see how flexible is your deck to deal with something that you technically weren't prepared for, but you can still outplay knowing kind of like the fundamentals.
Yeah, no, that's the thing. And that's why when I took my second loss pretty early, I was 2-2. And at this point, we were actually expecting it to be a 7-round tournament. And my logic was like, hey, I can take 1 loss early and that's okay. But I really don't want to take a second one because that forces you to win out. And the last thing I want to do is lose to some rogue deck like Chocobos or something that like I haven't logged a lot of time against, you know, where I'm reading their cards every turn. That's not what I want to happen, have happen. So luckily I was able to squeak that one out, and my final round was Mono Lightning, which I've played a ton against, and I feel like is probably my standalone best matchup. So yeah, that was fortunate. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing. As much preparation as you can do, you're still going to run into things that you're unprepared for, and that's where, like you said, you really just kind of got to rely on your fundamentals. There's some variance there too. Hopefully, you don't draw terribly, and just try to make it through those rounds. That's kind of the make or break situation for most people in tournaments when they get to that type of situation.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, I mean, I'd definitely like to put your theory to the test, since you said Mono Lightning is your best matchup.
Absolutely.
I'll definitely love to take you up on that offer.
All right, sounds good. I just downloaded Octagon recently. Actually, I played my first game with it right before leaving for Toronto. I feel so bad for the guy I played though, because I have no clue how to use the program. I'm like learning how to use all the shortcuts like F12 and all that stuff to like draw your cards, and I'm just like showing him my whole deck, discarding my hand, drawing 6 cards, and I'm like, oh man, I'm so sorry. I'm not a cheater. I just don't know how to use this program. You know what I mean?
You and me both. I have yet to actually sit down. I haven't downloaded. I just
none of us have. I don't think,
because I have that social awkwardness where if I don't know what I'm doing right away, I just feel really bad. I'm just like, look, I'm just gonna uninstall this thing. You win. Here you go.
Yeah.
Well, man, just hit me up. We can learn together. We'll both be brutal cheaters for the first, 4 games, just, not knowing what we're doing. And eventually we'll learn it and we'll be good to go.
Like, turn 1, apply all your forwards on the field. Like, oh, okay.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, man, give your opponent a point of damage. Yeah, no, just bad.
I did want to ask you, are you planning on attending any other events the rest of the year? Besides Nationals? Or?
Yeah, so, well... There's a couple events coming up. Obviously, there's Kansas, I think, is next month, right?
Yeah, the 23rd.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Well, I was planning on potentially going to Gen Con. They actually have two Crystal Cups, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
And I have a bunch of friends that are just going down for Gen Con, right? It's actually a huge convention. So I've definitely flirted with the idea of going to that. And obviously there's nationals that are going to be probably in, I don't know, November or something like that. So I'll be going to that for sure.
That's my guess as well.
Yeah, I think that's when they were last year, right? November, or maybe it was even October. I'm not positive. But I'll be going to those for sure. I really do want to make it to another event prior to nationals, just because, I mean, the amount of fun that we had at this tournament was just off the charts. I mean, way more fun than any of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Events I went to when I was a kid. Way more fun than any of the poker tournaments that I've traveled for, you know what I mean? So I really want to have that experience again, and Gen Con might be the best bet for that, just because I know a lot of people going. But I'm not entirely sure. There's also in the works, we're actually working on a couple Canadian events that will be kind of like how they have, the Pettit Cup and the Spring Cups and stuff like that. They have a lot of I don't even know if they're sanctioned events, but they're events that, you don't have necessarily a nationals invite on the line, but you have prize support, and it's still a fairly big event. We've got a couple of those in the works for Ontario, so we definitely will be doing that as well. But I'm really hopeful for Gen Con.
Well, if you do make it, we'll be there. Andy and I for sure will be there. At Gen Con,
okay.
At Gen Con for sure. I actually just recently bought my tickets for both events. I'm going to be doing the sealed and the standard.
So, oh wait, you can do both? I thought you could only do one.
If that's the case, then I'm gonna do one. But I bought both. I bought both because I'm gonna do both. First. Yeah, I'm gonna do both.
Man. Oh no, no, because I saw that too, and I'm like, oh, I'd love to do the sealed. That actually sounds so fun. But at the same time, I'm like, oh, I kind of want to do constructed as well. I thought that you had to choose. If you don't have to choose, I mean, I'm gonna be probably going for sure, because I'd love to play in a sealed Crystal Cup.
Well, I know
that sounds like a blast.
I know the sealed one's on Thursday all day, and then the constructed or standard or whatever is going to be Friday and Saturday. So, like, as far as I know, you can do both. And I think I've asked someone on the Facebook TCG fans or whatever, the Final Fantasy fans page, that you can attend both. So I'm full force, full throttle. Charlie's Angels 2, gonna do both.
Right on. Oh, that's sick. That changes everything, actually. 2 Crystal Cups out in one. Man, I'm gonna have a real hard time saying no to that. But I mean, I've got a wedding coming up that I'm planning. So I kind of can't drop a ton of money to go to Gen Con, but I think I'm gonna have to swing this. This sounds like a blast.
All right, there you go. Then.
Congrats, by the way.
Thanks. I appreciate that.
So, all right. Well, this wouldn't be a real podcast unless we got into some real topics about the game. And our first topic is going to actually be about monster decks as a whole. So we've been seeing monster decks rise a lot into the top, tables at these events. And I want to know what your guys' opinion is on monster decks. And do you think they are better than more traditional, forward backup summons? Or would you consider monsters just like techs and, utility cards to help you, take the advantage? Or, are monster decks the future for this game right now? Like, in this format and probably going into the next format, like Opus 6. Andy, you want to take this one?
Sure, I'll start things off. So my thoughts on monster decks is I really enjoy seeing a monster deck list. Only because it kind of just like further cements my hypothesis about the game, where the more sets with different things that they're creating for it, different mechanics, it evolves the game without introducing a ban list or restriction list. It kind of just changes the game it kind of just flows the game into a different different strategy altogether. So with the introduction of new strategies and with new cards and just new aspects of the game, it just generally like pushes the game into a certain direction. So I mean, I for one, I like where monster decks are going. They've definitely established a meta for themselves, and it's only been 2 sets that they've been in. So I mean, I think it's a healthy way to evolve the game without introducing any sort of restrictions on the cards that you're able to play.
So you don't feel that mainly monster decks have an advantage over regular decks?
Not at all. I think there's enough cards in every element to deal with monsters. You just have to know the right balance, and if you're willing to make the changes, go out of how decks are constructed since Opus 2, and kind of just start adding in more monster hate. So going back, you have traditional decks, let's talk Mono Lightning, that don't technically include any monster hate, but that they do have it in the form of the Opus 5 Odin, and I believe the Opus 4 Ramu that can actually destroy a level 2, a cost 2 or lower. Man, I can't talk anymore. A cost 2 or lower monster.
I think it's 3. The one that has it's pick one or the other, right?
It's one or the other.
Yeah, it's 2. It's 2? Okay.
Yeah. So, but yeah, so you see, like, you traditionally don't put those in your deck because you're already thinking, okay, you need space for your outsit combos, for your main backups, and then the only wiggle room is your summons. But then you start thinking, okay, do I care more about a monster or do I care more about a fort? So right now people are still in that mindset, I believe. But until they start thinking, okay, monsters are a lot of threat, and you want to just answer with a just a hard removal in general, that's when you start developing the deck a little bit more to be a little bit more flexible. So we do have the tools to do it, but as a player, are you willing to kind of like make the sacrifice of forward hate and start adding monster hate?
Okay, good point.
Yeah, I think the way you said that was really, really good, actually. Like, you don't have to, because a lot of games favor making ban lists and stuff like that, right? Or restricted lists or anything like that. And I think that was a really good way of putting it, in that you're changing the way the game operates. You're changing mechanics within the game, so it forces players to become creative and innovate and stuff like that without pigeonholing them and forcing them to not play certain cards. I think that's like the best way of doing it. So I couldn't agree more with what you just said, truthfully.
Yeah, I mean, it keeps all cards unlocked so that you're technically not losing any money value for what you've invested in. But at the same time, it really allows you to make some crazy decks up, because you have access to everything. You're not restricted to, oh, well, now it's going forward, we have these new mechanics, but now I can't introduce Opus 1 cards to it to make it, that much crazier brew.
All right, so Jordan, you mentioned that you agree with Andy, but would you also think that it's an equal playing field for both like traditional decks and monster decks?
Well, I think that you can see, like, so Opus 4 obviously was the first set with monsters, and I think right from the get-go, monsters was tier 1. I mean, I ran a water earth monster deck, and I think I saw several monster decks actually do well over the course of that set. And for me, anyways, I feel like it was very much tier 1 right from the start. Similar engine to what it has now, Cagnazzo. I mean, my version back then had Magic Pot with Kefkas and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing. They're not mutually exclusive things, right? I mean, a lot of decks incorporate a couple monsters in them. So, for example, a lot of lightning decks run Behemoth or Twilight Odin. A lot of ice decks have Buckaboo or Flan, So monsters are definitely going to have a big influence on the way future opuses work and how decks are built. Whether or not monsters has an advantage, I mean, it's hard to say that they do. I think that the mono water monster deck right now is clearly tier 1. It's extremely good. And the one thing that I think people aren't giving enough credit for is that deck's really tough to play. I mean, compared to other decks like maybe Ice, that forces simplification, you're playing cards and both players are losing cards essentially, right? You're reducing the game tree. So from a game theory perspective, Ice forces simplification and is by definition slightly easier to play than a deck like Mono Water Monsters, where it actually forces an insanely large game tree. You have so many options. You're typically playing with 5+ cards in hand at all times. You have a massive board and all these monsters with effects that are interacting. That deck is really, really tough to play. And I think that it's possible that we haven't even seen the best monster list put out yet. Everyone's kind of going with the mono water version, but it's totally possible. There's a monster deck list out there that hasn't been thought up yet and is the S tier deck, and we just haven't figured it out yet.
Okay, all right. I can get behind that actually. We're always sure that there's a deck there that's gonna come out of the woodworks and just blow everyone out of the water. Albert, do you have what's your opinion on the question?
Yeah, to me, like, the only monster deck, like you guys are saying, is the water one at the moment. Like, because a monster deck to me is not made like by the monster cards, because like you guys were saying, you could splash them into most decks, pretty much all of them. Because I mean, there's some unplayable stuff at the moment, like that wind monster that kind of targets like cost 5.
Or
something.
Death Guys?
Yeah. So there's some are more playable than others, but to me the monster deck is the forwards, like Realm and Mira, right? So as far as a deck, I think once they support monsters in that way with other cards, then we're not going to see like another monster deck sort of like come from it. But at the same time, like at the moment, like utility, that's where like I feel your biggest possibilities for creative decks is in the monsters, because I don't know if you guys noticed, but there's there's a guy by the name of Tony Jin. He top 8 this event with 3 Ozma in his deck.
Yeah, I see. I did happen to see that deck.
Like I've been all about Ozma since I read Ozma. So I've been like, that's bananas, because like no one, like they don't, until they print like the one monster that everyone like loves very much and like sees that's so broken that they have to, you know, deck specific cards to kind of like have answers for that, then no one's really gonna, you know, pay it give it a second look. But to me, Ozma is that card that's like, oh, if I stick this in like a deck that can like, you know, support it, like that would be, you know, a huge surprise to my opponent. And as well as like, you know, I would feel like I have a deck that's like, oh, has an edge over everything else.
Yeah, it was funny you mentioned. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, it's good.
But it's funny that you mentioned that, because Tony Jin is one of the guys from Ottawa. Okay. So I played with him more than anybody in this game, and it's funny because we always run the same deck. You know how you see deck lists and you see like player 1, player 2, whatever, and they're always like they have the same deck card for card in the event. Oh. That's me and him. Like we're cool. Really, really tight. We meet up all the time, and he's one of the like smartest deck builders, best players I know. And yeah, it's funny that you mentioned Ozma, because when we saw the card, we both, you know, we messaged each other right away being like, wow, this is broken, right? Yeah. And we played it, and I had Ozma in my deck until the like night before the event, basically, you know what I mean? When I switched into Fusoya, and like I can't agree more. I think he was probably the only person or one of the only people in that tournament playing Ozma, and I think that card is so underrated. It is so good, and most of the time, especially in Water where you have that whole power reduction stuff going on, when you resolve an Ozma special, which is searchable by Steiner, so it's not even like, oh, you have to draw it. No, searchable. When you resolve an Ozma special, I mean, I don't think I've lost a game, or I don't think I've ever seen him lose a game where he resolves an Ozma special. It's tough to lose, you know what I mean? Yeah. It just is so dramatic, because you can animate block Ozma special as well. It's not just a proactive effect. So I had to jump in when you mentioned Tony Jin, because shoutouts to him. He's a genius and deserves all the praise in the world for the deck he ran.
Yeah, to me that was the one deck list that like really caught my eye from the top 16 stuff. Like I always do that whenever there's like one of these big events. I like to skim through what some of the other players did, because, you know, I mean, props to the, you know, top 4 obviously, because they're like, you know, they played it out. But to get to that point, that means it had to stand up to a lot of the random stuff that you see in the first three rounds, let's say. And then to get to the top 16, you know that it has like, you know, the guts to kind of stand up to everything else as well, like the mainstream stuff. So I like to skim through those decks. And when I see something like his deck list, which I looked at like a good amount, because I was like, this is the kind of deck that I sort of would have wanted to make. But I looked at it only when before I knew about Bismarck and like some of the other stuff we got in Opus 5. So, you know, seeing it now, I'm like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like a lot of this stuff in here. And so when I see unique things like that, because I'm a big champion of the rogue stuff. And so while it's not a completely rogue deck, just seeing those 3 Ozma, like, you know that like that's a part of the deck. Like it's not like he just dropped it in there because I might try one or something. He was like focused on like, this is one of my main parts of the deck.
Absolutely, and I can tell you from playing and watching him play tons of games that it is a part of his strategy, and it is a card that wins him games, you know? Like the way we like to think about, because me and him think about it very similarly in terms of how kind of the game works. You know, each individual card has a share of a win when you win a game, you know? And the cards that you don't draw, they didn't influence your win at all. But the cards that you do draw have a small share in a win or a loss, whatever, similar to like how that stat is used in sports. And when you draw Ozma and use Ozma, it tends to be one of those cards that really influences the course of a game and really has its footprints or fingerprints or whatever on the outcome of a game. And typically, you know, if you do get to 3 backups relatively early and you can play it for a relatively low cost, it does usually have a very, very positive influence.
Cool.
All right. Well, you guys did mention we're going to move on, so thank you guys for answering that. I personally think that monster decks like that specifically revolve around monsters have a slight advantage, but only in certain matchups, not against everything. But I'm for now at the moment I'm stuck on like a more traditional deck, like when I play and stuff like that. But I do hope to see more monster decks come out from this new set coming, and I do think there will be a point where monster specific decks will take over of the top 8 at least, and we're gonna see like different colors and stuff like that. So
has there been any Opus 6 spoilers for monsters?
Not yet.
I don't think so. No.
Not yet.
I'm waiting for that legend monster. Like I want to see that. You know, like Ultima Weapon or something. You know what I mean? Like that'd be sick.
That would be cool.
That's what Kageyama. You gotta get on it, bud.
I'm still waiting for my legendary Dragoon. So.
Yeah, that too, right?
So, talking about Opus 6, I do want to talk about our next topic will be the new mechanic. Both Andy and you, Jordan, used the word mechanic in the previous topic, but taking control of forwards or even monsters is a mechanic that they're planning on introducing in this set. I want to know what you think what are the pros and cons, I guess, of it going forward, and is there some rules that we should be aware of or that we might want to talk about so people get like an idea? Because my concern really is when monsters were introduced, no one knew what to do with them or no one knew how they played. And I still believe that monsters mechanics are some of the things people like is a frequently asked question. And so, you know, we knew that monsters, when they came out, they had haste in the terms to use their abilities, but in order to attack, they had to wait a regular turn, like other cards, like other forwards. So when you take control of something, will I be able to attack with it per se on the moment? If my opponent summoned it on his turn just before, or like, am I going to be able to use the abilities and stuff like that? So that's one of my questions. Albert, do you want to start off this one? What do you think about the new taking control mechanic?
I mean, yeah, I think it's gonna. The first thing I thought of when I looked at some of the cards, I was like, thinking like, what if all my opponent's forwards are dull? Like, it's not really gonna benefit me unless they have some kind of cost like effect, some effect I can activate by paying the cost, and if I have the right elements, sort of thing. But I mean, I think that it's cool because like you're saying, like all the questions you have, and like the fact that we're even having this discussion is like some of the coolest stuff and the exciting part about the next set. So that's always fun. You know, like similarly like monsters, when you get new mechanics, it's just like, oh, cool. Like your mind starts, brewing and thinking all the ways you can abuse these new things. But yeah, I don't know. Anytime I was going back to Yu-Gi-Oh, like we all played Yu-Gi-Oh here. Mm-hmm. So for me, the most broken card in all of Yu-Gi-Oh forever will be Change of Heart. And I was a huge fan. I had 3 in my deck back when you could. I played that long ago.
Yeah. Oh wow, you're dating yourself there a little bit, eh?
Yeah, but that was the one card that I was like, oh, this is like, I don't know, it's just overpowered. So it's fun to see it for me. The mechanics sort of come to this game, and yeah, I'm just really excited for it.
Okay, Jordan, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of just agree. I think that it's a really cool mechanic. Obviously, I think it might not have the effect that Monsters quite had. I think Monsters had a profound impact on the way the game has gone since Opus 4, and it's had obviously a pretty huge influence where you see, probably the majority of decks run Monsters. So, or close to it anyways. But I don't think that'll have the same effect right off the bat. I like looking at the cards that were spoiled, at least. I don't know how playable they are, truthfully. So it might be one of those mechanics where it takes a couple sets for it really to have an effect, if that makes sense. But I mean, I'm excited for it. I think it's really cool. And yeah, I'm just interested to see what happens. I think, kind of echoing what was said on the previous topic there, I think anytime you introduce a new mechanic like this, it allows for new innovations and creativity, which is just has such a positive effect on the game as a whole. And as players and fans of the game, we obviously want to see cool new decks and innovations and stuff like that, right?
All right. Andy, Let's have it.
I'm excited. I'm excited about this new mechanic. Only because it does open up ways that you interact with costs. Meaning, so let's take Delete for example, where he comes into the field and you got to break something, right? So if you're taking control of one of your opponent's forwards, you can use that as cost to break something so he can come in.
Yep.
So yeah, so that's something that you can always start thinking about. Like, how do I abuse this new mechanic to start taking advantage of the field presence, things like that. The official statement right now that was released by Square Enix is that they specifically mentioned forwards. So I don't know if we're going to be taking like monsters yet, but we all know that once a monster is activated, there's a forward. It is a forward.
It is a forward. Exactly.
Yeah,
it's also a forward.
So if you're able, to pull something out while a monster is still a forward, that's pretty crazy, because now you have access to something that most of the times it can dole itself or pitch itself like Tom Berry's or something. So you technically aren't color locked with it, so you can like still use it and stuff. But I'm really excited about this new mechanic because it's one of the more stronger things that you can do aside from discarding cards from your opponent's hand, which I believe is the second strongest mechanic that you can do in terms of strategies. But yeah, taking control of your opponent's cards, that by far has to be one of the strongest things. And like Albert was mentioning, in Yu-Gi-Oh! It was the strongest and possibly still is one of the strongest mechanics that you can still do. But I'm really excited.
Okay. And I guess just in terms of I wanted to cover over what you guys thought were the rules were. Do you think, I guess most importantly is, do you think they'll be able to attack if my opponent just summoned it, deployed it or whatever the turn previously?
Yeah, that's something that has to definitely be explained a little bit more, because if it's something like if you've summoned it turn 1 and then turn 2 you use an ability that takes control of it, is it still under summoning sickness?
Exactly, yeah. So
is it, if it's a monster that has haste, I mean,
obviously,
if it already doled, can you activate it and then like swing with it? So it definitely needs a little bit more clarification before we dive into what we can expect and what we can do with it.
I wouldn't think that they could, like, if your opponent deploys a forward on their turn, and then on your turn you take control of it. Let's say in your main phase one, I wouldn't think that it could. I believe it was. The rule is that you have to wait for a full set of turns, meaning that on your next turn, not
correct. That's
the person who deployed it forward. Yeah, so I wouldn't think that forward could attack, but at the same time, if you could take control of a forward that was already deployed and is dull, if you can take control of it at the end of your opponent's turn, before yours starts, then it'll definitely activate on your activate phase.
Okay, that's interesting. That is very possible. I see what you're saying there.
Like, what's the Earth backup that lets you, like, I forget the name right now, the little cutesy one lets you bring on a forward from your hand if you pay the cost.
Tama,
yeah. Just if you Tama on the end of the turn, and then I think that those effects would work, then you'd be able to take control of that. That dull forward.
Well, I guess for the most part, I know we've only seen one. It was Shuyin, right? That was the card that was spoiled that takes control. It's for the turn, so if you take control over it at the end of your
for the turn,
you'll have to give it back right away. So, but I do see what you're saying though, is like to bring it, once it's dull, you can have it active, I guess. And we can't do anything on the activate phase. So, see, those are the kinds of questions that I wanted to get into with you guys.
Yeah, it's hard to say, really. I mean, it totally could be. It totally could have a huge impact in the game. It's just we have to see more cards, I think, right?
Yeah. So water was the first one revealed. I don't think every color is gonna get a change of heart. Honestly, because sometimes we see like certain cards. They kind of stay on theme for the elements. So like Earth mostly gets brave. Lightning gets a lot of haste. I believe fire is probably the ones with the most first strike. I want to say, I can't be sure. But so I'm thinking
fire gets the ping damage. So fire will have change of heart and ping something, and wind will have like change of heart and activate all your forwards.
And fire's also getting a new mechanic that I think they're exclusive to, where they pretty much can mill their whole deck in the form of Dark Lord.
But we haven't figured out what that's for yet.
That's the case.
Yeah, doesn't it actually remove it from the game or something like that?
Yeah,
like what I'm thinking is back to Yu-Gi-Oh! What if this is like Return from a Different Dimension or something like that? That would be a really cool mechanic as well.
Oh God. All right.
Well, the only way I can see that card being possibly played is one of two ways. One would be if they introduce a mechanic where it allows you to salvage cards from your removal from play, so you have kind of a better digging method because you know what you're putting in there. Or two, which I would thought was a little cheeky, was if you're able to somehow, some way use a card that deploys a forward on your opponent's side of the field, do they end up getting the on-summon effects on their side of the field? So basically what I'm saying is, can you summon Dark Lord on your opponent's side of the field and have them mill the top 10 cards of their deck?
That would be insane in mill decks. Like
that would make the card playable.
Firewind.
Just wishful thinking.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, and that's awesome. Think about it, guys. For everyone listening right now, when Firewind Mill comes out, please be prepared. All right, guys. Well, thank you very much for coming on here. Also, before we wrap it up today, I want to say our winner from the last podcast. Remember, guys, every podcast I will be doing a giveaway. It's a small giveaway. And the two best questions. The first one goes to Le Jour for asking if we can get our very own Andy Carmona to do the Manderville dance on camera. And Andy, do you want to give them?
That wasn't a question. That was a request.
No, it was a question. He says, "Can we get it?" And I think we can.
He phrased it as a question. So,
that's a Jeopardy.
Yeah. So the answer to that, one of two things. One, absolutely, we can get me to do the Mandeville dance. And two, on top of that, little by little, I'm actually putting together a Hildebrand cosplay. So.
All right.
Oh,
you've been warned.
You've been warned, guys. And the second question is going to be from Chris Miller. He did want to talk about Fire and how when Firion came out and the new guy as well, that Fire is going to be bringing a lot more presence to the board. So I want to thank him for that. So Les Jour and Chris Miller, please hit me up here so I can get your information so I can send out your prizes as soon as possible. And the last thing. Before we go, is there any last little anecdotes you guys want to say? Anything random, whatever you want. Shout-outs maybe?
I'd love to give some shout-outs if you don't mind.
Of course, please, go right ahead.
All right, so give obviously a big shout-out to the the whole event staff at Crystal Cup Toronto. I think you guys put on an absolute show and did a great job, total pros. Can't say it enough. You guys are awesome. All the people that we met over the course of the weekend, I mean, Greg and the BC boys, guys are awesome. Prince Noctis, Judge Gabe, and all the American beauties that we met. I mean, you guys really made the weekend. Jacob and Orlando, you guys are all awesome and made the weekend. Like I said, the worst part about the weekend was playing cards for sure. Gaming Kingdom and Game Breakers in Ottawa, Ontario for being the two best stores where we play, and they really take care of their players. If you're ever in the area, check them out. The Gordon family for harboring us for the weekend and taking care of us, and then obviously my teammates from Ottawa, Tony Gin, John Gordon, Jason Baden-Carew, and Nick Goodall. We fielded 5 of us. And the worst record was 4-2. You know what I mean? So we made Ottawa proud, and I'm proud of you boys. Gucci Kings assemble. And that's it. Oh, and Judge Brian, the all-knowing Judge Brian, for never missing a ruling and being absolutely outstanding. Cheers to you guys.
All right. Well,
and to you guys for hosting the pod. What am I saying? I don't want to miss that one. That would have been awful.
Thank you.
Props to you guys, too, for being the real MVPs. Appreciate you having me.
Awesome. Andy, anything?
Definitely shout out to the Break Zone for streaming and commentating. They did an excellent job. I think they provided such great content. I definitely enjoyed watching it. Definitely enjoyed watching Jordan winning as well. So that was pretty dope. Shout outs to Matthew Ogimoto for participating in a different way, which offering his commentating as well. So I don't know what ended up happening, but it turned out to be Matt and Lou that was commentating. So definitely shout out to them. Little tidbit of a little trivia for you guys, which I just found out recently. But so one of the other major, I guess, content creators, sorry, like I said, I can't think right now, but a definitely well-known name and face in the community, Joe Hill, and I do share a birthday, which I found was kind of interesting. So,
right.
Hey!
Well, happy birthday to you guys.
Yeah, so happy birthday to him. He definitely got a better gift in the form of legendary Kuja, so that's pretty dope. I'm sure he's excited about it. He even posted a video about it, so definitely shout out to those guys. And since we were talking about our brothers from another mothers out across the pond, definitely shout outs to Mr. Cool, Alex himself. They're actually they're doing their UK Nats this weekend. Yeah, so we're definitely going to watch that.
Yeah.
That is exciting. I can't
good luck to all of
that.
them.
Yeah, good luck to them. All those guys out there. Jamie Faulkner, who I believe is also playing out there, really strong player. So expect some magic from that guy.
Can't wait to play him at Worlds, man.
Oh, dude, it'd be a treat. Like, I don't even know what's going on.
Albert, anything?
No, just thank you for everybody who's watching us right now or listening to this, and for putting in the questions in the comments last time we did this. We appreciate it, and just thank you for the support.
All right. And actually, on that note, I forgot to mention something as well. So this time, the giveaway is going to be a little different. And I'm thinking we might stick to this format going forward. But I'm going to ask a question for you guys, the listeners. And whoever gives us the best, most creative, possibly even the funniest answer is how we will decide the winners. So this question for this podcast is, what character that we haven't seen before do you want to come out in Opus 6 and why? So there you have it, guys. Quick answers here. Jordan?
Well, I don't think it's coming, but I really, really, really want to see FF15 in there. I'd love to see like a Noctis or something like that come out, but I mean, I don't think it's coming.
I am behind you 100%.
Yeah.
Andy?
I want to see the Turks, all right? They have a completely array of awesome characters. I mean, they need to show up. They need to be their own amazing archetype. I don't care what element they are. They need to come out already.
All right. Albert?
I want to see, well, it's been out already. There's other cards. But I want to see a playable Cypher.
There you go. A playable Cypher. I would love that as well. And for me,
too true.
For me, I would have to say something completely funny and random, but I would like to see more Blitzball players, like the Beset Aurochs or, the Guado Glories, anything like that. And I would totally be happy with a Blitzball
we laugh
team.
Now, but 6 months from now, it'll be like, oh, well, the top deck is
the Beset Aurochs.
I was thinking they totally have to do field cards, like as a mechanic. Like I want to put down the Balam Garden field card and have it power up my Final Fantasy VIII seed cards, right? And I also want to be able to put, like you were saying, the Blitzball. You could put the Blitzball Stadium down.
the Spira Stadium.
That'd be so sick.
All right, guys. Well, that's going to wrap it up for our answers and our podcast. Thank you all for coming by, and we'll catch you next time. Say bye, guys.
Bye, guys.